Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Purely Flowing podcast. Sorry we're a little late. The tech was teching as it does sometimes. I'm Adele. I'm founder of Pure Flow State and we specialise in sustainable brand strategy for impact-driven businesses. Now the name Pure Flow State comes from the concept of flow state, which was coined by an Hungarian-American psychologist named Michal Csikszentmihalyi to describe a moment of pure bliss where whatever it is you're doing makes you lost in the moment and you could do whatever it is forever. Wouldn't that be great if we could bring a little bit of that into our businesses and into our brands? And we help brands to understand where they're at right now, what's flowing in their business, what isn't flowing in their business, and we help strengthen the brand to be able to flow on the inside with the people that work on their team, as well as on the outside with people in the outside world. Now, my guest this week is very familiar with that concept. She works specifically in customer experience and inclusion and action planning. Her name is Nzinga Orgill, and I'm very, very excited to invite her here today and for us to chat all about flow state. So, Nzinga, tell me, how has your week or your day been flowing?
It's been flowing really well. First of all, Adele, I love the work that you do, and thank you so much for extending an invitation for me to join you on this. So I'm really, really happy and excited. And yeah, in terms of the day, it's flowed the way it's meant to. I've got a good structure and schedule, so I kind of knew where it was flowing. Having said that, sometimes we get days we don't know where we're flowing, but it's
Yeah.
right. So that's the most important thing.
I was flown till about 10 minutes ago when the tech tacked. But we're here. It's fine. So tell me a little bit about your experience of flow. Is it something that you've been familiar with in your business life, in your personal life? How is it applied? Let's talk first about business, because you run your own business. This isn't the first business you've run. So tell me a little bit about your experience and what's brought you to where you are today.
So yeah, what a journey. And I think that's one thing that kind of aligns when I think about flow. Flow is almost like flowing towards something, right? So we're on a destination, we're on a journey towards a destination, which might change depending on how we change as individuals. So, for me, after the pandemic, after just taking time of being locked down with myself and thinking about what I wanted to do and the kind of impact I wanted to have, I thought, well, let me set up business in an area that I'm passionate about, which is around inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
So first business was around racial inequity, or, the lack of racial equity, and working with organizations to really support pushing that agenda and creating that inclusive environment for organizations that were struggling or on the journey that needed some support and help. And, I really enjoyed it because obviously it's something that I feel aligns to my purpose. It felt very easy for me to flow into it and to carry on building momentum and doing the work. But I think sometimes what we have to be mindful of is where we're flowing, we might encounter dams or bottlenecks that mean that flow isn't as smooth, it isn't as seamless. And there might be things that allow for us to feel a little bit overwhelmed that we need to take into consideration. So whilst I love the work that I did and I was really aligned to the purpose I had around inclusion, focusing in the anti-racism space just felt very heavy for someone who has to encounter racial inequity on a day-to-day basis, who has family and friends who encounter it on a day-to-day basis. And I found myself, if I'm really honest, loving what I did and enjoying the results I was getting, but almost to some degree a little bit resentful that actually this occupies my personal space, but also it's occupying my professional space. And I thought, what can I do to, I guess, alleviate some of the pressure in terms of having it all getting blocked up and stuck. And, that's where the pivot and the change around things that I'm good at and that I enjoy, but that also allow me to prioritize and inclusion came in. And that's where AVI to I was born. It is about, inclusion. It is about creating culturally safe spaces in terms of all types of inclusion. But it ties in a piece that's really important and close to my heart, Adele, which is around action, planning and taking. I mean, for us to flow somewhere, we have to take steps, which means we take action, right?
Yeah.
We don't just flow on the back of nothing. And for me, it was really important that when I was working with organizations from an integrity perspective, I wasn't just going in and talking about the challenges and the issues and wowing them with a training day and just kind of leaving them there to try and figure it out for themselves. So for me, the bit that I really enjoy when we talk about that state that we could do forever and ever and ever is the action planning, because with the action planning, you see change and you're able to measure it and you're able to pivot if you need to, but you're able to get the results that you set out for yourself to get. So yeah, that's, I guess a very short version of how I got to where I am. There's so much more. So
yeah, so much for me to ask you about everything that you've just said. And then I think first of all, like, we'll go back to like the purpose and meaning, that you had a very strong sense of purpose and meaning and were fortunate enough or ensured that you made that your life's work to be able to fulfill that purpose and meaning, which is brilliant. But I also understand how there were no kind of cut-off points and the lines were blurred between what was your personal life and what was life at work. And I think that's a reflection of how things are in general. It's systemic. It's happening, it's happening in everybody's lives when they're out and about, but it's also happening in the workplace, and it needs to be tackled across the board.
Yeah,
you can't just like focus on one area, can you? Because it's happening all the time, everywhere, to people of all genders, generations, ages. And you must have felt a considerable amount of frustration around that. And did it feel like you were making progress? Was that something that led to being really strong on the action plans and leading with the action plans? First we start with awareness and then we get to do something about it, don't we? Is that how it evolved for you in the workplace?
So yeah, I noticed I was going in and delivering some really great, training sessions and workshops, and people were giving me really great feedback and giving AVI2I great feedback around the work we were doing. But it was more a case of, I've worked with so many organizations, you do the training and then 3 months later, everyone's forgotten what they've been trained on. And for me, if we're talking about sustaining and embedding in inclusive practices, it needs to go a step beyond. We've had this amazing day. We feel so empowered to change our organization. But how do we do it? Oh, yeah. How does it align to our core values? Oh, no, I'm not sure what steps to take or how it impacts on the role that I play in the organization. So just based on feedback, based on trial and error. So injecting in, action planning, scenario-based activities, seeing how that landed with the people that were in attendance, and being really, transparent about the fact that this is something that I'm trying, and I'd love to get your feedback, and I'd love to understand how this can work differently and better and be beneficial to you, allowed me then to kind of come up with something that I felt was something that added value. And it absolutely has, since the decision was made about probably 4 months ago to really integrate the action planning piece. All of the organizations that I've worked with that have had action plans, whether they've been individual for their employees, whether it's been departmental, whether it's been organizational, have seen value in that, because people are not just waiting to be told what to do. They know what they need to do. And they're doing it in a way that aligns to who they are, Like, I think one thing to also kind of really put out there is how we all approach inclusion is very different based on who we are as individuals. The way I approach it is going to be very different from how you might approach it, Adele. And there's no right or wrong, obviously, as long as we're not causing damage and harm. It's about doing something that aligns to who you are. Then also, what kind of hats are we wearing within the organizations that we're part of? If you are a very senior person who's responsible for driving the strategic agenda of your organization, you might be in a position where you can actually really think about how you want to show up as an inclusive leader. Whereas if you're somewhere else in the organization that's at a different level, it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It just shows up differently. And I think that was what was really important to me, aligning it to individuals, their day-to-day roles, but also giving them an action plan that they can hold themselves accountable to.
And what you're saying is relevant for any kind of brand work that gets done as well, because I mean these are values and these are beliefs that need to be embedded into a brand. It is part of a brand. the inclusion piece is part of a brand. They have to incorporate that into whatever strategy they're doing, because they need to they need to care for the people who work for them. They need to understand the people that work there and the people who want to work there. So it's about attracting people to an environment where it's a safe space. They feel happy, they feel represented. There's diversity in all sorts of different angles that it goes across the board. So I'm loving what you're saying, and it's everything I believe in for brands anyway. And the same with, brands can come and have a whole brand refresh with a whole full brand strategy, and then put the document in the drawer and never do anything about it. So without a specific plan of steps to take, and they shouldn't be expected to do that because they're not the experts. Yes, we're there to go in and open their eyes to the potential and the possibilities and the opportunities that are there for them, but they need someone to guide them through that process as well. And it's not enough to go in and do the workshop and raise the awareness and have all the light bulb moments where everybody feels incredible and excited and what an amazing way forward, we're going to make these changes, but then they don't know how, because they're good at what they do. We're good at what we do, and that's why we come in to guide them through that process. And did you find, so saying that you introduced that about 4 months ago, where you kind of made it a non-negotiable to carry on with the action plan after you'd done the workshop and the learning, did you find any pushback from the businesses, or did you present it as a trial, something that you could test to see how it worked?
For the initial businesses I work with, I think the only pushback was in terms of, is this going to mean that the training takes longer? What will that mean for the individuals? Will there be a lot of work that needs to be done outside of the session? And for me, it was a case of, there's a way of designing training programs or workshops whereby you can really utilize and be intentional with the time that you have with the attendees that you've got in that room. Everything doesn't have to be done in that room. There's things you can do to set people up, so when they're walking into a room, they know what to expect. They've already had a chance to think about what they want to share and the things that are important to them. If there's examples, they've already had a chance to think about what examples, align to what we're talking about in that session. If there's scenarios or group activities, you can give people a bit of an idea around what to expect, so they can become a little bit more aware of what to expect. Then it means all of the stuff around the training and the information download can take a lot less time and can get into the action. And it's not to say, Adele, they're going to walk out there with fully finished, put together action plans. As anyone who does action planning or is involved in action planning, they evolve. Action plans are dynamic. There might be things that you think of outside of the workshop that you want to incorporate in. There might be things that you think, oh, actually, I don't really need to do that because I'm already doing it in a different way. So the most important thing is the ownership of the action, if that makes sense. We all wanted to create this inclusive culture. We all know it's important for many reasons, as business cases will tell us and show us. But what are we doing about it? It's almost like it's expected just to happen somehow. Going to a training session isn't going to create an inclusive culture within your organization. What is saying, what can I do as an individual in my role with the values that I have? What can I do to bring to life that inclusive culture? What steps can I take to make sure they're happening? And how can I hold myself accountable to those steps? Because without that, it's just lip service.
Yeah.
That's one of the frustrations that I have, Adele, in this space. There is so much talking.
Yeah.
We're striving for this, and we're inspiring to be this, and we're hoping to accomplish that. Hope and inspiration and well-wishing isn't going to get you where you want to get to.
No.
It is. And even if it's action that doesn't necessarily take you where you want to get to straight away, like flow, you can change the direction.
Yeah.
Use the flow which are going, that make sure that you achieve what you set out to achieve. So for me, I think that's really important. But initially people were interested and curious, but as they saw the benefits from it, as they saw the feedback from the people that were attending the sessions and the ongoing work that happened outside of the room, they knew that it was definitely a return on their investment.
Yeah, and it's so important. And everything that you say, I can apply it to brand as well, in the way that it's a living, breathing entity, and it needs to be nurtured and cared for. And it's not let's do a workshop and have done with. And there's so many other areas within an organization with regards to well-being. Mental health is another area as well, that you can't just do a team away day once a year and think that that's going to be okay and everybody's going to be fine for the rest of the year. You need to have regular check-ins. You need to have an environment where it feels like a safe space for someone to speak up if they're not doing so well. And it might not necessarily mean that they're not doing so well in the workplace. That could be their sanctuary, but at home they're having a really tough time and are struggling. But we're not going to solve that by having like one individual workshop. We're going to solve that and care for these people by ongoing interactions and ongoing check-ins, aren't we? And it's exactly the same with what you do as well. Like you need to be on a path. A path may change.
Yeah,
it may do. And it's not, I mean, really, it's the bare minimum, really. It's a bare minimum. It's not a nice to have. It's not, let's do this to tick a box. It's a bare minimum that should be ingrained in every single business. And I'd like to know if you've seen any change in the demand for this, or the appetite or the interest in this since the pandemic, specifically, where people are moving more to a hybrid model of work, where it probably is easier to mask any of these issues, things that are going on in the workplace.
Yeah, great question, Adele. I think at the moment, the climate around diversity, equity, and inclusion, there are a lot of organizations who are kind of pulling back resources from those teams and those departments. And what really scares me is that we need it now more than ever. With the fact that we've got so many different generations at the same time within a workforce.
Yeah.
We operate differently. We're from different, times, as people will say, and there are different things that are going to show up in how we work as individuals. We've got also, different people from different protected characteristic groups sharing that same space. We've got people who are working on site, or people who are working remotely, or a hybrid way of working. We've got people who might have language barriers, and there's so many different things. And this is why it's so important to not think of it as just, ticking a box, or it's got to be done because it's going to, look like we're doing the right thing. If you are an organization who is in the business of making money, yes, 100%, people are the most important thing in your organization. Without the right people feeling the right way, doing the right things, your organization isn't going to do well.
No.
But from a business perspective, there's so much untapped revenue out there that people are not taking advantage of because they're not being inclusive enough, or we're not thinking about how to draw in those communities. And, for me, it's just really, I guess, positioning yourself as an inclusive leader, as an inclusive organization. And after the pandemic, yes, there was a massive focus on the importance of inclusion with what happened with the brutal murder of George Floyd and others who we obviously witnessed, in our homes or in our bubbles because we weren't in a position to be out and about. And I think after that happened, there were many organizations that were very much on board with the inclusion agenda and how important it was. But it just feels like it's lost momentum and it's lost drive to some degree for some organizations who, let's be honest, probably didn't really prioritize it in the first place. But for others, the work has continued. And I think one thing as well is, you've got to be careful of not doing stuff to be looking performative or tokenistic. There are organizations, Adele, that are doing the work that aren't necessarily plastering pictures all over their social media or talking about it. They're getting on with it. And that aligns to me because as someone, yes, I'm talking now and I do stuff around professional speaking and I get out there and I deliver workshops. I'm not someone who likes to be speaking all the time. I like to get my head down and do the work. And I know there are organizations that like to get their head down and do the work.
Yeah.
The work is absolutely happening. And I think, for me, it's just really, again, reminding ourselves of why we're doing what we're doing and what it's meaning for us in terms of as organizations setting ourselves up to be future proof.
Yes.
Think about the fact that we've got a massive, global economy, lots of different organizations and businesses across different continents.
Yeah, there's no barriers now.
The emerging continents are not people who necessarily, are similar to the people you currently have within your organization or your clients and customers. So how are we tapping into those markets? How are we creating that, inclusive culture where people want to do business with you? So it's about thinking about those things. So from a past, present, and future perspective, what does inclusion mean? And obviously, inclusion will evolve. There are things and terms that have come up that have changed and shaped how we do what we do. But the most important thing comes back to that sense of belonging. Do I feel like I belong in this organization? Do I feel like I belong, using this service provider? Do I feel like I belong? And if I don't, I'm not going to want to stay where I don't belong. I'm going to find my tribe and my vibe and move there. So, it's about making sure we're doing the work, because as we evolve, choices are available to people. We already know that, Gen Z's prioritize diversity in organizations.
Oh, they prioritize so many things. I mean, like, organizations better sit up and listen, because these people want impact. They want to feel that they're part of something that is doing something great, doing something good for the planet. They want to feel like they mean something in an organization. They want to be recognized. And it's kind of like turned the tables, hasn't it? Like, who's interviewing who when they're coming to get a job? It's kind of like, do you meet all my criteria? Because if not, I don't want to work with you.
Yeah.
And that's how it has to be, doesn't it? It has to be that way. And I think we get to choose.
Sorry, I was going to say, Adele, I think there are people from other generations that have felt that way, but maybe haven't had the courage and the psychologically safe spaces to articulate that. No. Because I think, people do want to feel included and they do want it to be a priority, but actually, are they going to voice those concerns or voice how they feel if it's not psychologically safe, if there are consequences for them speaking about their experience, if it's going to hinder their progression and how they're treated? So I think we've created a wonderful culture to some degree now where Gen Zs do feel comfortable about speaking, but now it's to bring everybody else in, because they've all got voices as well. They just have been silenced for so long. Yeah. And I think it's important to get that inclusive culture that we hear from everybody.
Yeah, it is. And there's a shift in the way that, like, we view, like, having a job or being part of an organization. Let's say being part of an organization, because you do pledge your allegiance, and in the same way as you join a brand by choosing one brand over another, and you very much have a choice of, what you're buying. You're the consumer, you're in the driving seat, you have a choice to join one brand or another. And the same goes for when you go and work in an environment as well. You have a choice about where you work. And that, in past generations, I feel that perhaps wasn't the same, in that there was a definite onus on the employee and the employer being the one that was in the driving seat and deciding who came in. And I'm only having these people coming to work for me. They have to have been to this university. They have to be wearing this tie.
Yeah.
They have to. And thankfully, I feel, I'd love to hear your view on this, but I feel that they're now understanding the opportunities that there are with a more diverse workplace, where they're taking people from all walks of life and all experiences and all upbringings, all nationalities, all heritages, that can only be a positive thing.
Yeah. 100%.
Only.
I think the term culture fit was bounced around, like when you're looking at bringing people in, are they the right culture fit? They fit into the organization? Are they easy to kind of conform and fall into line with what we do here in this organization? And I think now we're moving towards a culture as it's looking at what you don't have and finding someone who can bring those skills and expertise to your organization and allowing them to feel comfortable in doing so and embracing them for that fact, rather than, penalizing them for being different. And, I think it is so important. We don't look at just where people studied or the qualifications and certifications they've acquired. how many times have we been around people who on paper look amazing, but when it comes to the practicalities of doing the role, there's probably a bit of work that still needs to be done. Whereas you've got people who might not necessarily have a certain level of qualification or certification or been educated in a particular, establishment, that can come in and absolutely deliver because the passion and the drive is there, the motivation to succeed is there. And I think that's something that has to be factored in, because also we learn differently. It's penalizing people who don't learn in the same way, who haven't had access to the same opportunities and resources from roles whereby they could do them, but because they haven't got the necessary steps deemed as the key to unlock the next level, they can't be put into those roles. And for me, I just think it's time we moved away from that and we move more towards, are you going to be able to deliver in this role? Are you going to be able to bring a different perspective and help me to grow as an organization? Or are you just here to fall in line and blend in, which, let's be clear, shouldn't be what anybody wants to do. And I know there are roles that obviously require specialist qualifications and certifications. I like to think that if you were a heart surgeon, you would have gone through the necessary. You're in the hospital operating on someone, but there are other things where there can be more flexibility around how we approach it. So
and then different levels of an organization as well. And I've been involved in recruiting people onto a team that I've worked on before, and like you were saying, I've on paper they're like, wow, this is the person, and then you meet them, and you think, there's no way you would not. I don't want to say fit in. There's no way you would thrive here. There's no way you would thrive because you've put down on your CV. I'm looking at what you've got on paper, and I can see all these things. But what I'm most looking for is someone who is open, who's willing to learn, who you can learn. Taking away like heart surgery, any kind of anything involved in a hospital. Let's not talk about that. You can learn most things. You can learn most things, and the important thing is an attitude towards learning, an open-mindedness, a willingness to fail, as well. Oh God, I'm trying to remember a quote that I read this week, or I heard this week. It was a particular organization, a very, very successful organization, who had a complete failure and lost $600,000 or something like that. And the CEO was approached and said, okay, so you're going to get rid of that person now? And he said, no, I've just spent $600,000 training them. That's not going to happen again.
That's brilliant.
It's a willingness to learn and be open, and be an ability to be flexible and to learn. That's what's going to take people far in an organization, isn't it? And not just like, nobody's going to go in with all the right skills to begin with.
Yeah. And you miss out on all the richness of different people. There's times where and we're all guilty of having biases, whether they're unconscious or conscious. There's times where you looked at a team, you thought, oh, I'm not going to fit in here, or these aren't my kind of people. And then you've actually given yourself the time and the opportunity to get to know individuals, understand how they work, learn about what makes them tick and how they show up in their capacity in the role that they're in. And it really helps you to grow as a person, because for me, it's always been the people that I probably think, oh, I'm not going to gel with, or we don't really connect, that I've had the most amazing conversations, interactions, and friendships with. And it's allowed me to broaden my perspective. And I think if we can get into a space where organizations are more willing to have that, can you imagine when it comes to creative problem solving or coming up with innovative ideas? You've got people who are completely different, who've got different ways of operating, coming together to collectively bounce around ideas for the benefit and the betterment of the organization. That's a winning formula, rather than, oh, I agree, no, I agree, no, I agree. So you've got 5 people agreeing with what you've got, which probably isn't a really great idea anyway, and down a rabbit hole because there's no one to challenge you or offer anything different.
This is it. You need somebody to come in there and say, well, what if? What if we do something differently? And I found this works really well when doing any kind of work with brands. Like, I don't just want like the senior leaders sat in a room, bouncing ideas off each other, because they don't know what's going on at all the different levels. I want the people I want the receptionist in there. I want everyone in there. I want all different levels, because I want to hit all their experiences, because at the end of the day, the people who work there are the biggest advocates for the brand.
Yeah.
They're the ones that are going to sell the brand out there and communicate to everybody outside of the brand what it's like actually being in that brand and being a part of it. So you need to hear it from every single person. And it was, it's like the famous NASA statement when they came in to talk to the brand about the vision and everybody, and like the janitor knew what the vision was.
Yes.
To put a man on the moon by 1969, and that he was on board with the vision. Absolutely, everybody shared it, and it made a really strong organization. You can't just have people in silos thinking up ideas and thinking it's going to apply to everybody, or everybody's going to be on board with it. It's not going to work.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Yeah, so that's taking care of business. So you've been running your business now since January, more or less, but you were doing something similar, but it's involved. It's rare that somebody actually widens what they do. It generally turns out that people are kind of like niching down and going narrower in what they do but you've seen that like there's opportunity, that we need to be working across the board. I love that. You've made more work for yourself. And you would say you've got multiple businesses, and before that, was there a time that you can think of where things really weren't flowing for you? And first of all, let's do work wise, and then we'll come to outside of work, when they weren't flowing for you, beyond just kind of focusing on what the wider reach of inclusion. Was there a time when you were out of flow with that? Can you remember?
I think, if I'm going to be really honest, which I'm very much about all the time, there are often times when I'm out of flow. I think when you are an entrepreneur and you're running your own business, you're going to have days where you are flowing, and you're going to have other days where you have no idea where the water's going, where you're flowing to. It's all new, it's all uncomfortable, it's all different. And I think one thing that I've just become very comfortable with is the fact that no 2 days are the same. Hour by hour is different. Month by month is different. Client by client is different.
Yeah.
The only thing that I guess I can regulate and ensure is flowing well is Nzinga. So it's about having the right kind of practices and things in place to make sure that I flow irrespective of what's happening around me. And, when I think about some of the instances that might kind of, have me think about when I haven't been flowing so well. So I've already spoken about when I pivoted and changed a little bit with the business. And I know you said I've kind of picked up more work. But actually what I've done is narrowed down the services I offer.
Okay.
Really focused on more of the action planning and inclusion side. Because there's so many things we could be doing in the inclusion space. And yes, whilst I can get involved in that, where can I be best of service to the people that I need to and want to serve? So really thinking about what can I do to support them, and my background allows me to lend itself more towards action planning, project management stuff. In terms of other instances, there'll be times where you've got a lot of work on, you've got lots of clients, so things are going quite well, as long as you're able to manage your capacity. And there'll be other times where actually it's quite quiet. And you start to question, like, what have I done? Like, why have I signed up for this? This can't be the dream that I was trying to create for myself years and years ago. So it's again about self-regulation and finding what needs to be done to make sure that you're not going through that constant, roller coaster ride of emotions. I think a lot of the things that I have experienced around where there has been a restriction of flow, probably, and I'm really honest, aside from what I've mentioned around business, has been when I've been in a corporate setting and environment whereby, it has been more around how I've been made to feel. Let's be clear, we all have inner doubts and we all have inner voices that speak to us. but I'm really good at silencing the negative voices and amplifying and turning up the positive voices, because I know that what we say to ourselves is probably the most important thing we will ever hear. You know, not what other people say to us or think about us, but what we say to ourselves. So I really make sure that in terms of myself, I'm speaking well about myself to myself as much as possible. But, you know, there have been instances where I've been in rooms and in settings where I would experience things like microaggressions. I would experience being left out. I would have inappropriate comments and conversations made. And even with the negative voices down and the positive voices amplified, when you're getting that as well, it's just a reminder of like, my gosh, just let me belong, let me be. And it then turns itself internally into a case of, well, these environments and spaces are probably going to be like this for a while. What can I do in myself to make sure then that I've got that sense of belonging? And it's about muting the negative voices and whacking up the positive ones and saying, if I belong here in me, where it matters, and here in me, I belong everywhere. Every room I walk into, I belong. Every space I'm in, I belong. And I think that was something that was really important for me to do in corporate spaces where often I was told I didn't belong. You know, often as a senior project manager, I was being mistaken for the person who was clearing the coffee cups away and taking the waste bin out. You know, and actually, no, I'm chairing the meeting. How are we at a point where we don't even recognize the fact that I might not be that person who you think I am? You know, it's just, these are things that happen to many, many people. And it's just, yeah, definite examples of where the flow has not necessarily been as great as I would like it to be. So, yeah.
I'm thinking, you know, when you're talking, I'm, you know, thinking about some of the, obviously that is super obvious and there's no doubt about, you know, when people are mistaking you for not doing something that you're clearly not there to do. But the little microaggressions, do you, as I know, you know, I've suffered them as well, you know, as a female in the workplace, we get it. And sometimes I don't actually realise until afterwards when it kind of sits and it's, oh my God, that really wasn't on what they just said. But in the moment, it's kind of so ingrained that kind of it's just so systemic and it's so there that right in the moment, I don't always realise that it's happening. And I wonder if, you know, was there a moment where you realised that and you were able to kind of like switch it up a little bit and become more aware in a way that you could kind of stop it dead in its tracks, which is what I wish I could do. Like, I don't always notice it until afterwards, though.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Many, many instances, you know, as a Black woman, you face many microaggressions, you face many narratives that are applied to you that don't necessarily align to who you are as a person. You know, I've had comments made about my physicality, around my hair, around my name. And, you know, what you do is sometimes, to be clear, Adele, it's not going to always be a case of you want to call it out right there and then in the moment, because as professionals, we still need to navigate the corporate space. And sometimes the person you're calling out is your manager, or is someone who's superior to you, or is someone who's a decision maker when it comes to your career. But, you know, it's about assessing the situation, but still following through in terms of challenging it in a respectful way. And, you know, positioning it from a point whereby I'm not sure if you meant it to come across this way, but this is how it made me feel. And however you meant it, what is important is how you made me feel. And I have to communicate it and ask that, you know, going forward, you don't use language like that or make comments like that. And then for me, because I've always been, I guess, quite outspoken and comfortable about challenging these things, I've taken it to a point whereby sometimes if it's done in a very public setting and space, it's not enough to have a private behind the door conversation. Because let's be clear, the comment wasn't private and behind closed doors. So there's a piece of circling back and communicating to those that were there, and even broader than that, that this type of behavior is not acceptable. But what is so important, Adele, is when you are calling out behavior like that, to obviously honor yourself and how you feel, you're not making the other person feel excluded in the process, because inclusion is for everybody, even though you might not be the ones who are particularly acting inclusively. So it's thinking about, rather than almost you know, putting this person on the outside, penalizing them for what they've done. It's about bringing them in closer, but getting them to understand that their behavior is not acceptable.
And I think also it's important to say that if you're the person on the receiving end of that microaggression, it doesn't have to fall to you to call that other person out.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
So, you know, if there's somebody else in the room that's seeing that, they should speak up too.
That's a massive conversation, Adele, not just in terms of calling out microaggressions or even bystander intervention, but also, you know, things like cultural events and, you know, employee network groups. It shouldn't fall on those that are impacted directly all the time. It shouldn't fall on those who have that lived experience. Inclusion is an everybody issue. It's an everybody thing.
Yeah.
So if you're seeing something that you don't like, you don't need to jump in and defend that person, because that person, to be quite honest, might not want you defending them. What you can do is defend how you feel and say, I feel uncomfortable by this conversation.
Yes.
I don't know where it's going, you know, and, you know, or I want to support this initiative, or I want to get behind this culture day or this new process, because I believe that even though I'm not someone who might not have that lived experience, I believe to be truly inclusive, these things need to be in place. So I think it's that piece around, you know, everyone getting involved, but absolutely calling it in and calling it out where you can, and finding a way to do that yes, aligns to who you are, but also allows for there to be an opportunity to learn from that situation or that interaction.
Yeah, thank you for that. And when regards to like kind of dialing down that, you know, negative voice that you've got and dialing up the positive one, what have you got any tips and tools that you use to do that you could share?
Yeah, so I've got a little structure in place. I've done quite a lot in the self-development mastery space. So I'm an avid meditator. I like to journal, and I do 2 types of journaling depending on the way in which Nzinga is showing up on the day, because I'm authentic. Sometimes when I am in a very calm, relaxed state, I'll get my pen out, my notebook out, and I'll write very eloquently and beautifully. But sometimes it just needs to come up.
Yes.
So I've got a voice diary as well that I kind of speak into.
Okay.
It allows me to really just almost purge how I'm feeling. So if I'm frustrated or really excited, I'm someone who can talk quite quickly.
Yeah.
I'm quite slow at the moment, but when I'm excited, there's emotion behind it. You literally have to probably ask for subtitles because I'm speaking that quickly. So for me to even think about what I'm saying and trying to write, no, not going to happen. So if I've got a voice diary, I can kind of purge into that. But then also I can replay it back and hear what I'm saying, hear how I sound, because that's really important in terms of where you're at as well.
Yes. Feel the emotion.
I try and exercise. I don't love it, but I know it's important for me, and it's all about doing what's good for you, not what feels good. So I try and do some exercise and do it in a way that, you know, allows for me to enjoy it as much as I can. I schedule my day quite concisely, and I block out time for particular activities, but I really make an intentional effort to make time for things that are important to me.
Yeah.
So stuff like spending time with family, stuff like spending time with myself and doing the things that I love, time to sit there and think. I'm an ideator. I create and birth lots of different ideas, and this helps me when I create training content for my clients and customers. I can't ideate anything if I've never got time to kind of sit and be with myself.
Yeah.
So there's lots of different things that I do, and I find that by having these things in place, it allows me to flow easy because I'm flowing from one thing to the next. Whereas if I haven't got a structure, if I haven't got a schedule, if I haven't got a plan of what I'm doing, I'm flowing all over the place. I'm flowing into your river, I'm flowing into your field, and Nzinga's just flowing. And in order to kind of rein it in and make sure it's flowing in the right direction, it helps. And what it also does as well, Adele, is there are going to be days where actually, you know, I do overflow somewhere where I shouldn't be. Get back to plan, like, this isn't where I'm meant to be, you know. I should
get back in your river.
My own river and stick to the path. And, I think it's just really important to kind of have those things in place to really support in terms of, you know, how I then show up and how I manage, how I feel, and then how I've got capacities to support other people as well. You know, I'm doing something that it's a very uncomfortable and can feel quite a difficult area to talk about. I've got people who are coming into spaces who sometimes have had such awful traumatic experiences around the things that we're talking about. And if I'm all over the space and place, then I'm no good to anybody. If I
No.
manage to regulate and manage this and flow and have that seamless approach to how I do things, it creates that openness and that safety for people to then want to share, because actually the person who's facilitating or leading the training, it's flowing nicely, rather than, oh, she's taking us on a roller coaster ride. I'm definitely not opening up, and I don't want to share, and I don't want to be here. So I think that's extremely important.
Yeah, you need to make people feel comfortable, don't you? And you know that they've got a safe space to share, and that they're getting what they need out of any experience that you have with you and you're present. I love the idea of those voice notes. I had a mentor once, and she shared with me a little tip, and it was what she called it a drama dump. So she had somebody who was, you know, friend, colleague, whatever, that she could call them on the phone, and she would just literally call them up. I'm going to do a drama dump. She needed to have a rant. She didn't need anyone to interact with her or say anything to her. She just needed to get it out. And then it was like, okay, done, bye. Okay, that's it. And that was the end of it. And I think it's a bit similar with that, other than the fact that you're actually calling someone. And I don't know what you said about you speaking too fast. I'm the opposite. If you have me on a recording, you could speed me up to 1.5, and that's like the perfect speed, because I speak quite slowly. But trust me, in my head, it's like it's going at 1,000 miles an hour most of the time. But like, my voice somehow manages to calm it down. There's some kind of filter that goes on there, like a slowing filter that comes out. Because like, if it came out as fast as it's going on in there, my God, nobody would ever understand a word I said. Oh man. So what would your advice be to anyone who's feeling out of flow? How could they? I think I'd like to apply this specifically to a place where they didn't feel included in the workplace, and like, you know, that they feel that they could be more seen in the environment where they go into every day to work. What would be your advice about how they could flow a little bit better?
Great question. And going probably maybe on what I've experienced and what I've done for myself, because I think we'll all approach it differently. And obviously, you can take the steps that apply or what resonate with you. But I think the first thing to do is to kind of really think about your why. So, why are you in that space in the first place? Why are you pushing in that position or working in that department or doing the work that you're doing? You know, what is the bigger picture for you? Because often, you know, when we are on a professional journey, there is an end goal or destination that we are trying to get to. Even if it might change every 3 to 5 years, there's still something that people tend to be working towards. And you can often find out what that is by going back and revisiting things like your career development plan and things like that. And then it's to understand, right, okay, what is being in this space costing me, you know, and what is it costing me in terms of not just, I guess, you know, the benefits you're getting around the knowledge and the information and the opportunities, but what's it costing you in terms of your own mental health and well-being, the toll it's taking on you. And then it's about deciding, right, if I want to get here, and if that, because some people might decide, Adele, because let's be clear, you know, I would love to meet anybody who can say they 100% love their work, they 100% love all their colleagues, they 100% love all their customers and clients, everything is perfect. They're living their best life. Every day is like showing up to the best thing ever.
Have you ever met anyone who says that?
Maybe 95%, but not 100%. No. And I don't think it exists, because the reality of the situation is, for us to really acknowledge and, you know, and appreciate the good, there has to be some bad to let us know it's good. Not a lot. And that's the thing you also need to ask yourself, like, is there too much of the negative and the bad stuff in what I'm doing and in the space that I'm occupying? And is it enough for me to bear with to get to where I need to get to? Or actually, do I need to take myself out of the equation? Yeah. Because some people will stay in spaces and will endure the pain and suffering to get to where they need to get to, where they're then able to make the decisions that they need to make, or, you know, implement and impact on the people that they want to impact on. But it's up to you to decide, is that a space I want to occupy and be part of and be in? Mm-hmm. And then it's to think, well, if I want to get here, what other ways and routes can I get there? Who can I speak to support me to get there? Have I got allies? Have I got an inner circle who I can speak to? Have I got a tribe inside work, but also outside of work that can support me on that journey? Am I doing the work on myself to be able to regulate myself? Because let me be clear, when you are in difficult work environments, often you're triggered. There's been many a times where I've had to literally cast my mouth shut because it's been like, how dare you? But you're thinking, no, because that would not necessarily project the kind of response I would want for this situation. Is another way of doing it. And I think, you've got to understand, sometimes rather than lashing out, it's about doing the internal work, but finding a way to come back to that. Because I'm not saying be anyone's doormat and allow people to treat you.
Exactly. Yeah.
But be very mindful that, I've had friends and colleagues who have spoken out about something that's been completely inappropriate. I mean, disgusting, Adele. And because they have spoken out in a particular way, the response has been all about how they've reacted.
Yes.
What was initially said.
Yeah.
Not to say that you are not entitled to react how you want to react, but be very mindful that people will weaponize that against you.
Yeah.
Agenda. So I'm more inclined to say, okay, that you just said that to me. I'm literally replaying it in my head, thinking I'm doing the voice diary thing in my head.
Yeah.
Purging and cussing, but then what comes out is more a case of, okay, I need to understand what this person's intentions were and be clear about what they're doing so I can document it and follow up and follow through. So it's about, I guess, taking that time to regulate internally so you're able to respond in the right way that aligns with the outcome. But to be honest, Adele, taking yourself, out of situations that don't serve you if they're not going to give you the benefit that you want, because sometimes we need to be in environments that don't serve us to understand what does, and also to build us to be the version of ourselves that needs to be there on the other side. So it's almost a very personal thing. What can you deal with? What can you tolerate? What's in line with where you want to go? What lessons can you get from what you're experiencing, and what type of impact does that have on you in terms of how you show up as an individual? So I'd encourage the person to go back and really think about why they're there and what the end goal is in terms of being in that space, and then what it's costing them.
I love that reflection, and is, if you've got a clear end goal in mind of where you want to be, there isn't necessarily just one route to get there. This is where we get to be really creative in how we arrive at our goal on our terms. Obviously respecting anybody that we come into contact with at the same time, but it's rarely a straight line, let's face it. But it can go off in many different angles and directions, and I think that's the joy of the journey, isn't it? Like what we learn and what we take from that journey. And actually, while we're on that journey, we might decide that we don't want what we thought we wanted in the first place anyway.
100%. And that's why I love the analogy of flow. Because you never stop flowing.
No.
And sometimes it's a flow, you're flowing, you're seeing scenery that feels familiar, and like, yeah, I'm on the right track and I'm going to where I need to get to because it all makes sense and it aligns with what I've got in here in terms of what I should be doing and how it should be looking. But there are other instances where you are flowing into the unknown. You're like, where am I? Like, what am I doing? Like, why am I here? And that's the great stuff, because it's stuff that you don't even know it's going to support you in terms of getting to where you want to get to. So all I'll say with that is just flow through it. Find what you need to find to keep yourself as much, within your protected energy as possible, but flow through it and find your way to where you're meant to be, because you never know. It could be a different route that's being carved out for you that will get you to exactly, where you need to be, as opposed to following the route that looks familiar and feels comfortable.
Exactly. And everything changes, nothing stays the same. So if we are in an uncomfortable time, and we all go through them, sometimes more than others, you think sometimes it's a little bit uncomfortable, sometimes it's very, 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 very uncomfortable. But I think one thing that has always helped me, and that comes with experience, is that it's gonna pass. Whatever it is gonna pass. If it's just a mild discomfort, that's going to pass. If it's like way out there on the discomfort levels, that's also going to pass. Nothing stays the same. That's just the nature of life, of flowing, of absolutely everything. We all move, we all flow, and as long as we're moving forward, well, sometimes we need to move backwards to kind of reassess, but generally we can move backwards to move forwards as well, you know, but it's moving. That's my point here. Things are moving, like they're never going to stay the same. So even if we are feeling bad, there is a way out. There's always a way out, isn't there?
Agreed. Sometimes we're moving forward, backwards, sideways. Sometimes it's
like a whirling dervish.
Literally, but we're moving, right? We're moving. So.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, and Nzinga, I absolutely love this chat. Thank you for sharing your insights and inspirations. You're so knowledgeable in what it is that you do, and I love that. We are going to drop the links in the comments of where people can find you. Thanks for joining us this week, and thank you to Nzinga for being my wonderful guest.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure.